Hi, this is Janet Sandberg, the host of Phoenix Wisdom Podcast. Welcome to another episode. Today, our guest is Kim Harms. But before we get to her, I just want to introduce myself a little bit more, which I've started doing lately. If you're a regular listen, you'll know, because I realized that people generally didn't know who I was. So I am a coach and healer. I do energy healing. I connect with your soul's wisdom and passion to help you rebuild your life with passion and purpose according to what you were put on the earth to do. Um, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Kim Harms is our guest. Kim, tell us about you.
Well, previous career, I was a dentist for many, many years, and then I developed nerve damage in my drilling fingers, which you really can't use as a dentist. So I
That's
had,
important. Yeah.
yeah, it was really important. So then I stopped. I had to retire at 54, but I practiced with my husband, and I now I've been around the block. Let me just say, in life, I'm 67 years old. I've been around the block. I've lost my mother and son to suicide. And I lost my husband to a broken heart after my son died.
Oh.
So I have been around the block emotionally as well. But I
Mhm.
must say now I am, my husband's been gone for 3 years. I have 6 grandchildren. Luckily, he was able to meet all six, and I have a very full life. And I just wrote a book. Are you ready? How to build a legacy to die for? To help people take a look at their life with the end in mind, the long term in mind. And I've been really enjoying that part of my life.
Good. Amazing. This is going to be a good episode with lots of insight. I can already tell. So yeah, I don't know where to start.
I don't know where to start either, but I'm here. I'm still here.
I always have like,
That's that's my story.
yes.
With love, you
Um,
survive and thrive, and that's a story. Because I've been, when my mother was sick, I was 17 when she died. She was bipolar, and when she was driving across country pregnant with me, she happened to stop in Cincinnati, Ohio, which was her home city, but also the place they were testing, the only place I think in the US where they were testing thalidomide, which was a drug used for
oh.
pregnant women to help
Mhm.
with pregnancy. So my mother, who was a hand model, I was missing fingers on my right hand, and I know that affected her quite a bit. My father and mother were divorced when I was 3. My mother ended up going into the mental institution when I was about 6. So I only had her for 6 years. But I know we talk a lot about mental illness and things on this podcast, and I have to tell you, she was the best mother you could ever ask for. She was absolutely fabulous mother, but I lost her at 6, and then I lost her again permanently at 17 when she took her life. When I, that really had a huge effect on my life, and during that time, right around the time, I mean, even before I lost her, we have a lot of depression in our family, and I was very low, and my brother and sister both had been, admitted to hospitals after suicide attempts, and
Oh my
and
gosh.
I would do mine quietly. Luckily, I was not very knowledgeable about drugs. I was pretty innocent back in those days, and so I thought, Somanex would do the trick, So I tried a few times and thought I just wouldn't wake up, but fortunately I did. Having survived that, I think that's the message I like to send is you don't know what's coming down the road, and there's so much more that awaits you in life, and you can have control. It might not look like it right now, but you can have control. You can get your life back. You can have joy in your life again, no matter what happens to you. So I think that's a big message.
Exactly. Exactly. So just going back for a minute. So for the younger generations who are not
Yeah,
familiar with thalidomide, it got really popular in what, like the 50s and 60s?
the 50s. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was given to women to help with their pregnancies, but then eventually what they found out was it caused birth defects
Yes.
in basically everyone who took it. And they became known as the thalidomide babies, which is unfortunate and why we do drug testing.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. And why we need to be super careful when taking anything while you're pregnant. That's you
Yes.
really found out that is
That you have to test it on pregnant people as well
yeah,
as not
yeah,
pregnant people. Yeah. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So, yeah, oh gosh, I can't even
Yeah.
begin
All
like
not on you at once.
yeah. No, I'm just thinking like from your mom's perspective, like she's got she's already struggling with bipolar and mental illness, and then she has that thrown at her. She's trying to do what's best, and then
Right.
I imagine that she would have had a lot of guilt.
Absolutely, and, they didn't know what was causing this at first. 1956, it was about 1962 when this occurred. I was 6, and my father, who was a brilliant man, he was a physicist, he was a rocket scientist, he was brilliant, 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 but not really very good about relationships, let's just say that. And he called my mother when he heard about the thalidomide, when it just came out in the early '60s that this is what was happening. So he called my mother and said, that it's your fault that,
Oh,
fingers. And then she went immediately into an institution. She came out
oh,
3 months later. And by this time, my dad had taken us to Maryland with his new wife, who, by the way, he forgot to tell his new wife that he had 3 children that she was eventually going to have to take care of.
oh
Anyway,
my
so yeah,
gosh.
got into that situation. My mom called back in 3 months and said, I want the kids back. He said, no, I'm not giving them back. I already bought the bedroom furniture. And then she went back into the institution for the rest of her life
Dang.
until she died. So it was very, very sad story
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Gosh.
hard on us.
Yeah. Hard on her. And then of course you take that on as
Yeah,
as a child.
yes, yes,
Um, and then, well, all of you apparently did,
yes.
working through that. And then you grew up.
And we grew up, and my brother and sister and all of us were depressed and had been suicidal. Luckily, we were not successful, fortunately. But I had a beautiful son, Eric, and he was brilliant, just like his grandpa. He was brilliant. And he had made it into his dream school, actually Columbia University in New York, where they were recruiting him because he wanted
Wow.
to study engineering and jazz piano, which that was about the only place you could play in the jazz clubs and then study engineering, just because
Right.
he was a great jazz pianist. He was a National Merit Scholarship winner. He was just a wonderful, kind, caring, compassionate young man. Reminded me of Robin Williams, really funny. And, I think sometimes people that are really super smart have other issues. Had a great success first semester at Columbia. He was actually elected to student government at Columbia. Like, who could do that?
Wow.
He was in the plays with the Barnard students, having a great time with that. Played piano all around, was in the jazz program, and got on the dean's list in engineering. You couldn't have had a better first semester. But he also had a girlfriend that he was in love with, and he was on top of the world when he came back after his first semester. And 2 weeks into the second semester, and just 45 minutes after his girlfriend broke up with him, he was gone. He took his own life.
Gosh.
And, he was 19, his brain wasn't fully developed, and I just want to send that out to everybody out there. If you're young, your brain is not quite there yet until you're about 25 to be able to manage these things. So
Mhm.
know that it gets better. And he was a jazz pianist, which is impulsive. He was extremely compulsive. Just
Mm.
think again of Robin Williams at the piano. He was just like that, just very impulsive. And, he just couldn't handle this, what is a normal life experience. I mean, it was his
Yeah.
girlfriend, if she loved him, should have broken up with him. It was a normal life experience, and he made a very poor decision, and it was a permanent one. We were close family. He was our youngest child. We were completely just devastated. I mean, like,
Yeah.
just torn into a billion pieces. And one of the things that I learned that really has helped me in that deep, deep despair. So I've been in that grief pit a few times. We all know that. I've been down. I was going to buy curtains because I was just going to live there for the rest of my life. But I learned something really important. And that occurred maybe about a month after Eric died. We had gone back to work. We had just gone back to work. My husband and I are both dentists. We had our own dental practice. We'd gone back to work. We were in that zombie phase. Anyone that knows,
Mhm.
you're just walking around like you try to smile, but the inside is you're just dead inside. And I walked out of my office. My husband was standing there with his cousin, and the cousin had lost his brother at the same age, at 19. He had gone out drinking with his friends, and he had passed out, and his friends put him in the car, drove him home, thought they were doing him a favor, left him in the car. But he lives in Minnesota. It was minus 10
Oh
degrees outside, and he
no.
froze to death in the car.
Oh my God.
And this cousin came to me as I was walking out the door, and, you're walking out like a zombie, you're walking out, wagging his finger right in my face, and it was like, "Who's doing this to me? I'm a grieving mother, you can't do this to me." Wagging his finger in my face, and he said, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel that they are not enough."
Wow.
That was that was a life-changing sentence to me. I still get goosebumps because I looked at him and he had essentially lost his parents
Mhm.
and he lost his brother. He felt that the parents were in mourning the rest of their lives, in deep
Yeah.
mourning, and you are. I mean, it stays with you, but you can overcome. I just wanna let everyone know you can get through it with a lot of work, but you can do it. But they couldn't get through it. They were in deep mourning. He and his sister felt that he had lost his parents emotionally when his brother died, and then
Mhm.
he felt he wasn't enough because obviously,
Aw.
and so that hit me because my husband had just had a liver transplant 6 months before. He was
Oh
in
my
deep.
gosh.
Yeah, he had had liver cancer, so it was a bad time for us. He was struggling physically and emotionally, and my daughters, were struggling with all of
Yeah.
they just lost their brother, and they were I had one daughter in law school who couldn't read for a while, because when you have that deep
You just can't focus.
catastrophic loss, you
Yeah.
can't focus. So she was struggling, and I realized that, "Okay, Kim, you have got you've got to get yourself out of this pit. You got to work. It's not just about me anymore." And I think that's
Mhm.
the thing to know that life isn't just about us anymore at all. It's about all the people around us that we impact. And I could
Mhm.
impact them I could be like the cousin's mother who was sad the rest of her life. I could go around in mourning the rest of my life and
Mhm.
affect everyone around me as I did that. Or I could fight, kick, and scream. And it's not easy. It doesn't happen. And not everybody can get out, but I think we all need to try. We need to work hard. We need to do the work. I was treated for depression and successfully. My husband, unfortunately, was not. And he, within about a year, developed serious heart issues because, when you suffer in depression, you're suffering grief, and you don't work through it, you don't work through the process, it affects your body in terrible ways.
Absolutely.
And he affected his heart within a year, and it had checked out great before his liver transplant. They don't give you a new liver if your heart's bad. So far, so
Right.
good. They
Yeah,
gave
they
it
test all the things
right,
first.
right. And then a year or so later, there he goes. It was with a 9-hour surgery and a quadruple bypass, a
Oh
valve
my
replaced. It was a
gosh.
huge surgery. And then he did survive for a while long. He did survive, and he was coming out of it. He was getting better. And I think that what we didn't realize at the time is that life does move forward, even though you're stuck there for a bit until you can work through it.
Mhm.
And eventually, my daughters successfully graduated from law school, hallelujah, and, they ended up finding, because they were making some poor choices in their dating life, I just have to say, there were some questionable characters there, but they found wonderful husbands, I now have 6 amazing grandchildren, and we are a family, we're a smaller family. I mean, I remember when my son died, it was so hard because we were a family of 5, and
Mhm.
now we're a family of 4, and that just might not make sense to people that haven't lost a child or remember the family, but when you have this structure that you're used to and the
Yeah.
peace, and I thought, "Oh, I can't add anybody to this. I can't have a grandchild because I would love somebody. I can't love somebody again because it's too hard if I lose them. It's better not to love anybody. I'd rather just, I when all those crazy thoughts went through my mind. They're all untrue, let me just tell you. But here I am, you know, my husband also got better, but his heart had been damaged enough then that he
Mm.
ended up dying of congestive heart failure. But he was making it through, and I've made it through, and I'm moving forward, and my daughters are moving forward. I have 6 grandchildren, and I think the biggest accomplishment of my life, I can say, is that right now I can live in the present and enjoy the moment as it is with the grandchildren without that shroud that
Mhm.
covers you, with grief or mourning or depression. I can live completely with those members of my family that I love. I'm going to a softball game tonight. I can't wait. She might touch the ball, maybe who knows? Doesn't matter, but I don't care. Well, I'm with them, and I have other people in my life, and I have a very good life. I have a joyful life, and I just want people to know that that is possible no matter what happens. Even though I lost my job, and in the meantime, then I lost my ability to practice dentistry. So my identity as a daughter, a mother, a wife, and a dentist were out the window, and all the plans we had made for our retirement home, gone because we just sold our cabin that we would have retired to, and I just can't do it by myself. So,
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
yeah, even with all of those things, you can have a joyful life, but it takes work. And I'm treated for depression, and I will be the
Mhm.
rest of my life. I realize that it's not something that I can choose, just like my blood pressure medication. I can't choose to get off of it. And so as long as I, continue with that, I have a very, very joyful, fulfilled life. and you just don't know what's waiting for you. And when you're down in that pit, you can't see straight. You cannot know
Exactly.
what's going on.
Yeah, we're in it, we're in all the feels, we're like, "This is it, this is how it's always gonna be, it's never gonna get any better," which is obviously falsehoods, and that's
Well,
just the story that our brain is telling us because it's so overwhelming at the moment, that's it just feels like that, like, how could this feels so true at this moment, how could
yes,
it possibly ever be any different? But, like everything else in our lives, we've gotten through it.
yes,
When whatever, you have a fight with your friend in second grade on the playground and you think that's it,
yes. That's for
we're
grandkids. I
never
call
gonna
that.
be friends ever again, and then you're best friends the next day. It's all just moments in time. We need to keep that perspective, which is not easy, but just hang on. And, there's that meme that says, you've made it through all the hard days so far with 100% success.
Right.
So you can keep doing that.
And it's really interesting to look at some of the research about happy. There's happiness and joy. Happiness is what's in front of you. Joy is something you get from inside, right? If you take a look at like I said, I'm 67 years old. People are dropping around me. I mean, this is this is the time we have a certain life expectancy, right? And
Yeah,
it's
that's
happened
when
to
it starts.
people, in my age group face a lot of grief.
Mhm.
They're also one of the happiest cohorts because what has happened is we have accepted that this is part of life and
Mhm.
we have learned to be resilient through what we've gotten through before. So whatever you're going through now, if you can fight your way, and you can't get out of it without fighting, it doesn't come easy. You can fight your way out of it. You can learn from it, and that can build on your resilient level, so that when the next, because either you live a long life and everybody around you dies, right, or you die early, and then you don't have as many problems,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
sometimes in the scheme of things. But when you're older, if you take a look at your grandmother, your grandfather, take a look at them and look at what they've been through. I was able also to meet a lot of people from Rwanda. I do a lot of work in Rwanda now, and those the people in Rwanda are amazing. They suffered a genocide where they saw the aunts and uncles, cousins, brothers and sisters murdered by their friend, what they thought who they thought were their friends or their next door neighbors.
Mhm.
And here we are, that's 30 years later. They're a thriving country. The people that did the killing have been put in jail and they've gotten out now, or they've left the country. And the people that have survived have learned to forgive and to
Mhm.
reconcile and all those things that are really hard for us to do. They've learned that, and, so I was able to really take a look at my life here in America, especially, like, during COVID. I was out there during COVID, almost didn't get back, but my friends there were, in huts with no electricity. Luckily, they grew their own food, so that was helpful, but they had nothing. They were in their huts and had to stay there, and here I am in my little home with
Mhm.
my water that I could just turn the faucet on. I didn't have to go out and get water. I could watch Netflix or whatever. I had entertainment there. I have books. I have all kinds of things that we can do. And I think getting a global perspective is really important to really take a look globally and also over the ages, what people have endured and suffered. That helps me. That really did, and that doesn't help everybody, but it helped me to kind of get my issues in my life in perspective. And it helped me to move forward. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes that was they were like the Rwandans were my grief counselors, I think,
Yeah.
during that.
Yeah, I mean, you wanna be careful not to, compare my feelings with their feelings and, or
Exactly.
compare someone else's tragedy with your own tragedy. Like there's no comparison. Whatever you're feeling is what you're feeling. It can't be
Exactly.
measured against somebody else's misfortune. But
Right.
also, I think, when we suffer tragedies, when we go through lots of grief or illness or whatever else is going on, we not only build resilience, but we learn how to really seize those moments of joy and
Exactly.
happiness and appreciate them a lot
Right.
more and find pleasure in the little things because we know that those moments are also fleeting, and just as your bad moments aren't going to stay around forever, the happy ones aren't either. So we have to appreciate them when we're in them and, consciously create good memories.
And
And that's
thank you.
one of those things that like our brains are really good at remembering the bad things
Yes,
and not so good at remembering the good things. Like there's, I've seen on several places around the internet where, somebody could say 25 good things about you or 50 good things about you, but the only thing you're going to focus on is that one bad thing,
absolutely.
you
That's
know, and and that's just for some really stupid reason the way our brains are built.
right. And thank you for pointing out, because boy, I can see where that might be misconstrued. Thank you for pointing out that you don't compare your grief with other people's grief. You never do that. And your grief is your grief, and your how you manage it is the way you manage it. What it helps me to do is to kind of get a global understanding of what the human being is able to
Mm,
survive.
yes.
And I think
Yes.
that for me, that's a helpful thing. And I would seek it out on, on some YouTube. I would Google some tragic occurrences and try to figure out how did they make. And so I think that's the value. But you're absolutely right. Everybody's grief is individual. Their way out of it is individual, and you should never ever ever feel badly that you're in grief, because just an emotion that you have that you really, it's a personal one, and it's affected by your life and what happened to you
Mhm.
that nobody else can understand. So thank you
Yeah.
for pointing that out, because I wanted to make sure that.
Yes. Yeah, and grief isn't just about losing people either. You can suffer grief, if you move house, if you move, across the country or even just across town. It upsets your life and you're grieving the life that was and the things that were while you are trying to build the new life, after loss like divorces or, things like that. Even when it seems on the surface to be a good thing, like graduating high school or graduating college, it's a big transition in life. And there's grieving there too sometimes. And so grief is, I think, really misunderstood in a lot of ways. And we need time to mourn for lots of things in our lives. Not just the wonderful people that we lose. And also, just don't listen to other people and their opinions and judgments. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it, and that's good. I
And
remember when I don't know, I was probably around 20 or so, and my uncle passed away. And I got the phone call when I was at work.
mm,
And so I was upset and, stayed in the back room for a minute. And my boss came up and said, "Oh, what's wrong?" And I said, "Oh, my uncle just passed." And he's like, "Oh, like how was he your uncle? Like how are you related?" And I said, "He was my aunt's husband." And he's like, "Oh, well, he wasn't your real uncle then." It was just like, it's me. Like, okay, this man started dating my aunt when my mother was maybe 10 years old. Like he had been in the family for like 50 years, at that point. I'm like, What? What do you mean? Also, it's none of your business. Also, he was obviously there when I was born, as far as I was concerned. He's always been my uncle." And I was just like, how do you think like that? So you never know who you're going to encounter and what opinions they're going to have. And it was almost like he was like, "Oh, well, you don't need to be upset then." It's like, well, I can be as upset as I want to be. I can grieve as much as I want to grieve, and I'm not
and
going to let you tell me any different.
some people just don't have, because they don't develop close relationships with people.
Mhm.
They don't understand how other people can develop those close relationships with people, and then that just goes to show you can never judge how
Yeah.
someone else is feeling. Your relationship with your uncle was a relationship, whether he was your uncle or married or whatever. It was your
Yeah.
relationship with him that you built up since you were a child.
Yeah.
And and even the idea to judge anyone that you knew that had passed away, and what your relationship, whether it was an uncle or married uncle or whatever, you can't judge that. If you're suffering from grief, you need to be able to talk about it in a safe place. You need to be
Mhm.
able to understand it. And I know that I had a dental hygienist who lost her son to suicide much the same way my son was lost after a girlfriend broke up with him. Those brains are
Oh.
just not quite fully developed and they feel like their life is over. And I didn't, even though I had lost my mother, even though I was sympathetic as I thought, empathetic as I thought, even with all of those things, I did not have any idea how much she was suffering and how long it would take. And I remember, about 2 years after, I kinda thought, "Well, should she be kinda coming out of that?" I was so wrong. I did that. Even I am guilty of that. So I think that, I certainly have learned that it could be a whole lot. Even the aunt that never recovered from her son's death, well, she's still in mourning, and you can't judge that. You can't
Mhm.
judge that. It had affected her the rest of her family, you can't judge her grief, but people will do that, and I think it's unfortunate, and we need to maybe do a little more work with trying to let people understand that grief doesn't have a timeline, it can't be judged, it's individual. Just because
Yeah.
you respect each other, my husband and I grieve completely differently for our son, we had to respect each other's grief, and I think I did not go into his bedroom for 3 years, I couldn't go into his bedroom, I walked past it every day, and my husband would go and sit and look at his books. I mean, so,
Yeah.
we were very, very different, but we had to respect each other and help each other along in our
Yeah.
grief journey.
Yeah. And just like everything else, grief doesn't last forever. Well, it does. It changes over time. But you never heal completely from grief, I don't think. I think, I lost my sister 10 years ago and it gets better for sure. But there'll always be something missing and that will never go away. So the grief will never go away. But you learn to live with it. You learn to just accept that this is the new normal. And same with depression, at some point, some people get to a point where they're not feeling it as much, and they're living their lives really, really well without the depression interfering. And some of us were just like, I think this is just going to be forever. And it will change over time. There's highs and there's lows, but we know that it will change and that things happen in life that get better and our perspective changes also as we age, thankfully.
Right, exactly, exactly, it does. And
Yeah.
again, even as you get older, and you've go through a lot or more, things that happen to you when you get older, including your body declining and everything else,
Mm,
and being resilient is such a big help. Being resilient, and I think one thing that we can do, I know with my sister, my husband was a 12th of 14 children.
my gosh.
I have a lot of sister-in-laws, and
Yeah.
they're pushing 90. One of them turns 90 this year. Most of them are in their 80s, and we just have a ball because we can't remember a thing. Our mind will play charades, and then finally, if nobody can think of it, we'll look it up on our phones, and we laugh and laugh and laugh about how we're falling apart. And being able to laugh at yourself is a very, very good way of coping. Being able
Mhm.
to just laugh that I'm human, and I think part of the issues that sometimes that we have in life today is we have these inappropriate models for what we're supposed to look like or feel like, and they're just a bunch of hooey. They don't mean a thing. It's crazy, but when you get to be older, you finally figure that out. And I wish I had figured it out when I was 20 instead of when I was 60. I
We
didn't have
all
to
do.
imagine all the grief I would have avoided if I just figured that out. But I think that's one of the reasons that even in our as older people, we are tend to be happier because we are more accepting of life and its challenges. And just wish we could bring that down to a younger age to be.
Yes. Yeah. And I think I've probably lamented on this podcast before about the lack of community connection that we have these days. You don't know people of different generations. You know, you might be lucky if you go to church or you live in a small community where everybody just knows each other. But for a lot of us in urban environments, we just don't have that. So you're not hearing the stories of old people like us who have been through stuff and how they got through it and they're, living their best lives now. And so now we have podcasts to share our stories with people who haven't been through it all yet. But yeah, it's still a little bit different when, you're sharing the same space with them physically, and you're able to go ask them questions and like, how did you get through that when that thing happened?
And
So,
I think that that's a really good point about the importance of community. I mean, I been in so I was Catholic, I'm Baptist, I was pres I've been to a lot of different churches. My husband, was Baptist, we ended up in a Baptist church with our kids, but I don't always agree with everything, but it's my community. So you don't have to
mhm,
agree with everything, but it's my community. They've been with me. They knew my son when he was a baby. They knew him when he died. They had a huge funeral for him and he went to a Catholic school, so the Catholics were there too. We had this gigantic, huge funeral. And when my husband died, the same thing. And I still go there because they're my people. I go
yeah,
there to meet my people. And again, I don't have to agree with every tenet that the particular church will support. You don't have to agree with that. But it's wonderful to be with a community of people. And so if it's not a church, it could be people that share the same artistic talents or something, a
mhm,
guild
a
or
running club or
running club or something. But being with other people is very, very important. I think we were not meant to live this life on our own.
no, and we weren't meant to live it with only people the same age as us or the
Yes,
same generation as us. It's really good to, I learn as much from my kids, I think, as they do for me and in their like without their perspective, like how boring would life be?
exactly, exactly.
So,
And it's different. They live in a different world than we did, and so
mhm,
that understanding, I've learned my daughters are, in the late 30s, early 40s with kids, and I have to bite my tongue quite a bit because, they're raising their children differently than I raised mine, and I have to learn that, well, they're their kids, so job and their relationship is far more important than any judgment I might have, so I have to kinda our heads might judge a little bit, we just have to keep it, from coming out of our mouths sometimes, we just have to accept and allow that to happen and respect them for what they are and what they're doing, and that's an important lesson to learn as well.
absolutely. All right. Can you leave our listeners with one last piece of advice when they are finding themselves in the what did you call it?
Bit
I
of
say pit of
despair
despair.
and grief. Yes, that
Yes.
desolate pit of a despair and grief. Don't buy curtains, don't live there. I think that's the biggest thing. The thing that I learned through and I learned it a couple of times because I've been through, in the cycles for me, is
Mhm.
that life is important, that you have a purpose. You have a purpose. There's something you can do. My purpose now is with my grandchildren. I'm the only maternal grandmother they have, so I support them in every way I can. And believe me, let me just tell you, that is the best time of life is when you get older. It truly is because you feel that you don't have to be judged. You kind of live your own life. But no matter what happens to you, there is nothing that you can't eventually, not tomorrow, not the next day, but by working through, overcome, and learn to live a joyful life. And I just want to tell you, it's a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to live. And you can do it. You just have to work at it. It's work. Don't ever take it for granted. Don't ever think you can just stay in one place and it's just going to be the same. You have to make an effort to
Mhm.
get out of that pit. But when you do, it's a fabulous place to live.
It is. It starts off really hard and then it gets easier. But yeah, you have to make that choice every day.
Yes, every day.
Well, you get rest days.
And it gets better as you move up along. If you as you climb your way out of that pit, it gets better. The thoughts are better, your demeanor is better, but it takes work. And I think knowing that knowing that you can get to that place where you can climb out of that the pit is not a permanent residence is so
Yes.
critical that you're and you have a purpose in your life. You have value and a purpose for who you are.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with me today, Kim, and sharing your story and your inspiration with us. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.